You could understand why terrorists were more at ease during the Obama administration. After all, he seemed more eager to make excuses for all but their most grievous of offenses than he did in defeating them. This is no longer the case with President Trump in charge. When a group has determined that they are willing to die in order to kill those they hate, you are not dealing with people with whom you can negotiate. Why is that so hard for some people to understand? Even if they are not prepared to be suicide bombers, Islamic terrorists are not interested in negotiated settlements or peaceful coexistence. They want those who do not ascribe to their beliefs dead. President Trump understands this. Hence, it should come as no surprise that he approved an airstrike in Somalia against a terrorist group that has publicly declared its loyalty to al-Qaeda. The United States launched an airstrike against terror group al-Shabaab in Somalia on Sunday. It was the first damaging strike carried out by the United States under expanded authority granted by President Donald Trump in March. The al-Shabaab militants pledged their loyalty to al-Qaeda in 2012. Somalia said its special forces joined in the attack that destroyed one of the terror group's primary command posts in southern Somalia near Sakau, some 185 miles southwest of Mogadishu. Note that U.S. forces worked with those of Somalia to attack these murderous lunatics. Thus, we can conclude that the Somalis don't want them either. The office of Somalia's president, Mohamed Abdullahi, said the strike was successful. This will ultimately disrupt the enemy's ability to conduct new attacks within Somalia, a release from the president's office stated. While terrorists commit inhuman acts, they are still humans. Thus they are subject to being worn down, discouraged, and made hopeless by seeing no chance of success. They may be willing to die to advance their cause, but many are not going to be willing to die for nothing. Thus, the goal is to foil their plans, destroy their training camps, and disrupt their communications. Pentagon chief spokesperson Dana White said in a statement the operation was conducted in coordination with regional partners as a direct response to al-Shabaab actions, including recent attacks on Somali forces. We remain committed to working with our Somali partners and allies to systematically dismantle al-Shabaab, and help achieve stability and security throughout the region, the statement said. So, once again, what are the goals of these terrorists we are fighting along with the Somalis? Reuters reported that the terror group was setting its sights on seizing control of Somalia's government, forcing out African Union peacekeeping troops and eventually establishing its own representation of Islamic law. If those in Western nations believe groups such as al-Shabaab only have intentions on nations in other parts of the world, they are whistling past the graveyard, and need to be disabused of that notion at once. The U.S. needs to start protecting itself now, and believe it or not, the Civil War didn't start because of slavery. Attention all Antifas, fascists, progressives, and anyone else who believes that the Civil War began because of slavery. It didn't. It was economics. There were many differences between the North and the South. Basically, it was bifurcated. This means that they were on opposite sides on almost all issues. Before the war started, Congress was represented by two groups, the North were Republicans and the South were Democrats. The North was industrialized and had already banned slavery. In addition, they had 90% of all of America's skilled labor force. The South was plantation agricultural based that used slave labor. There are three economic issues that put the spotlight on why the Civil War began. Banking. There was a difference between the North and the South regarding banking. 60% of all banks were located in the North. By 1860, there was strong support for the creation of a system of banks that would be chartered and regulated by the federal government. But in the South, which had little need for local banking services, there was little enthusiasm for such a proposal. However, the Republican-sponsored bill for a national bank failed because of the Democrat-controlled Congress. The country was growing from the 1840s to 1860s. The expansion of the railway required government subsidies favored by the North. The South required far fewer internal improvements than people in the Northwest, and they tended to view federal subsidies for such projects to be part of a deal between Western and Eastern interests that held no obvious gains for the South. The Pacific Railway Bill of 1860 was designed to build a transcontinental railway link to the Pacific. However, the bill failed because of the Southern Democratic voting bloc. Tariffs. The North was populated with industrialized companies. This led to the desire for the North to have high tariffs as protection against cheap British imports. Not only that, high tariffs were also a source of revenue for the federal government. But the South needed low tariffs with Europe in order to sell their cotton and still make a profit. Hence the major economic division between the North and South was over tariffs. During the period of the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, the Democrats in Congress kept the tariffs low. However, things changed in the 1860s election when the Republicans took over and almost immediately increased the tariffs. During the period of the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, the Democrats in Congress kept the tariffs low. However, things changed in the 1860s election when the Republicans took over and almost immediately increased the tariffs. Yes, there were other differences between the North and South beside economics. The North agreed with the Founding Fathers that the Republic was perpetual, the South argued secession. The two groups argued over the slavery issue when the territories of California, Oregon, and Kansas were brought into the Union. The North wanted the states to be slave-free, whereas the South believed that idea interfered with their rights to own slaves which they considered to be property. The end result was all three new states became slave-free. The North wanted the states to be slave-free, whereas the South believed that idea interfered with their rights to own slaves which they considered to be property. The end result was all three new states became slave-free. Things were so divisive that the Southern states warned they would secede if Abraham Lincoln was elected president. Barely 1 month after the election, South Carolina seceded on December 20, 1860, and the Cotton States of Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed suit, seceding in January and February 1861. The war began when the South bombarded Fort Sumter on April 12 to 13. Here is one final economic note. In his article entitled, The Civil War and the Democrat Distortion, Adrian Vance hypothesized that the Civil War could have been prevented. At the time, slaves were each worth about $800. A bond issue of $4 billion could free all the slaves and provide each newly freed slave $200 each. Considering the Civil War cost an estimated $6 billion, it would have saved money if the federal government had taken this economic action. Obviously this idea never happened. Yes, slavery was a large issue in the Civil